Welcome to episode 7 of 101 Mobility Conversations. John, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
It's great to see you, Joe.
How's
Thank
the
you for
weather up
having
there? How's the weather up there in Boston?
me. I'm actually hanging out in Florida this week, so it's 80 degrees today, so I'm living large.
You don't care. So,
Exactly. My wife's getting snowed on, but I'm warm.
well, excellent. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking time to be with us. For our audience, if you could, they're probably going to see in the header that you're the CEO and founder of Boathouse Creative Marketing. But can you give us a little bit about your background and how you got to this company? And I know the story, but I think everybody else would enjoy your journey.
Great. I started in the business. I haven't been smart enough to get out of the advertising business. I started almost 35 years ago in the agency business. I started in 1989 at a firm called Hill Holliday out of Boston, big national firm. To be straight, it was not the most difficult interview process of all time. My father was the founder and CEO of the firm. And so I was going to work for my dad coming out of school. So I worked for him in Boston. I worked for him in New York and just got to be sort of very close to the CEO and watch how it's done and how you build relationships and how you do it right. He sold it in 97. And so after 8 years, I went down to New York and worked for McCann Erickson, which was the biggest agency in the world. So I went from sort of the biggest in New England to the biggest in the world. And I was kind of hoping that the business would be a little different globally. We worked for big clients, Coke and Microsoft and General Motors. But what I found was it was less strategic and more vendor. And we were just with longer plane flights. And so I decided in '01 to come back and start my own. So we've been at it now for almost 25 years and just really trying to, very simple, old fashioned values about sort of do it the right way.
So let me make it clear. So your dad actually interviewed you for the position.
He did actually interview me for the position. He also did the first orientation for the position. The orientation the first day was probably 3 minutes long. He gave me a pad of paper and a pen, and he said, all I want you to do is if you make a promise, write it down and keep a promise. And that's it. If you do that well, you'll be successful in this business. And then he, slapped me on my ass and sent me off out onto the field.
Pretty good life lesson there, right? Just
Yeah.
promise, write it down and do it. So that's excellent.
Exactly. Simple rule.
So, listen, I've known you for a long time now, but I remember the first time I visited you in Boston and that beautiful building of yours. Can you tell the audience what's hanging large in your lobby as you walk in and greet new customers and prospective customers?
Yeah, no, I appreciate you embarrassing me in the fifth minute or maybe the third minute of the podcast. So in our lobby is a big sort of probably 10-foot by 10-foot sign that one of our creative sort of art directed, but it says humbly cut through the bullshit. And it was sort of a build on for the first 10 years of the company. That was actually on the homepage of our website. And just the mindset, we always believed that it was a filter for clients because the bureaucrats wouldn't call us and the decision makers would. And so we tried to filter out the bureaucrats by having that on the homepage of the website. And it really came from the story you asked me to reference earlier, which was, what I found in the big agency world was that the BS meter was really high, right? It was high inside the company and it was high between the clients and the agencies. And we just felt like there was a really simple opportunity that if we call it like we saw it and really helped clients and didn't bullshit them, that we'd build better relationships and we'd have more long-term success. So 24 years in, it's still working.
Well, when we first met, you had also said that, and I know you studied this, is the relationship between the CEO and the CMO and the marketing leader, and that you quickly try to, ascertain, are they aligned? And if they're not, you tend to steer away. Maybe you want to talk about that for a couple minutes.
We do an annual study. We're actually just about to release the next one on CEO perceptions of CMOs, right? And so our belief, to your point, is, the CMOs been having some challenges over the last sort of, maybe 10 years across all industries and across all companies. And what we're seeing is there's this lack of trust between the CMO and the CEO. And I work for the CMO for a living. And so if the CMO is not trusted, it hurts my business. So we've been really working to study what's going on between the CEO and the CMO, and really start so that we can help them and counsel them and consult them to improve that relationship. So it's been a fascinating experience studying that.
Is the gap widening or is it shrinking? I mean, you've been doing this survey for quite a while.
So so this is now going to be the preview of the data.
I didn't.
No, no, Scoop. That's Joe, the Scoop. Scoop Lock. You know what I mean? So what's interesting is I think CMOs are getting some religion. They're getting smarter about building better relationships with CEOs. So that's the nice trend line that's happening there. And for the record, the big search firms had identified that CMOs had the shortest tenure in the C-suite. So that there was sort of real data out in the market that everybody reported on, and we were trying to get to the bottom of that data. The interesting thing is, while the relationship's getting better with the CEO and the CMO, the CEO's belief in the marketing capability of the company is actually getting worse. And so you have the relationship's getting better, but structurally they have less trust in marketing, because I think what we're seeing is they don't believe marketing is solving their biggest problems and helping them with their biggest issues. And so that frustration, so there's an erosion of trust now with marketing, while the CMO is growing.
Is that being driven by I mean, it's reality today of just having to drive results on a quarterly basis and short-term revenue pickups, and just a lack of, hey, a brand takes time to develop, campaigns need time to develop and to find adjustments. I mean, that lack of trust, is it being driven by this really stark change in the results in such shorter periods over the last 10 years?
Yeah. So what we saw in the data, what others have seen, Gartner's reports on this as well, and their sort of CEO studies. Everybody was focused on growth for 5 years pre 2020, in COVID, and then everybody started to get focused on a bunch of other variables. DEI became a big driver, employee became a big driver, stakeholder capitalism became a big driver. And now in the last 2 years, every CEO shifted back to growth, to your point. So everybody is just locked in on growth, growth, growth. So that's part one. Part two is, I think that, you know, the other piece we've seen is every CEO has a transformation strategy, and the consulting firms have been selling transformation strategies, and private equity firms are selling transformation strategies. So, and 87% of CEOs are between 0 and 75% of their way to their transformation strategy, right? So basically, I say everybody, it's kind of common sense, right? Everybody's halfway to their transformation strategy. And so what I believe, and from anecdotally as well supports the data, is that CEOs are deciding who's with me on my transformation journey and who's not with me on my transformation journey. And they're not spending time with the people who don't get it. And they're maxing time with the people who are helping them on their transformation journey. Right. And so common sense.
Yep.
And so if the CMO walks around and says, and is a little disconnected from the CEO on the vision and strategy of the company, they get less time. If they're lockstep with the CEO on, they get more time, right? Again, not a sophisticated model, but everybody, sometimes a lot of marketing people will overthink the role and try and be smarter than the CEO or be smarter than the board or be smarter than the transformation strategy. And they say, well, you don't understand brand the way we understand brand. And so they'll bring this archaic definition of brand to bear, and they create separation, and they just get further and further away from the center of the team.
Well, it's one of the things that you and I latched on when we first met. It's going on 5 or 6 years now at my last brand when we were going to, rebrand and rename a company. Our marketing leader at the time, Heather, and, three of us, I didn't know at the time, but you were clearly assessing, are we aligned on what we're trying to achieve here? And is it aligned with the overall strategy, which at that point was, serve more families, more often for longer. and thank you very much. You created the longer part of that strategy
Yep.
at your offices in Boston. But you know, that journey that began with you also introduced me to the whole concept of we can never walk away from the importance of empirical data research and making sure that we're really listening and learning from our customers. But then you introduced me to narrative marketing and the importance of, listen, the brand needs to speak a certain language in a certain way in order to achieve attraction. And it's been life changing for me, not just because our relationship continues to the current brand I'm with, but just in how I view the market. Um, how has AI and narrative marketing evolved over the last 5 years, and what's next for this area?
Yeah, no, there's a bunch there in your comment that I want to address. So first, to your point, we were evaluating two things when we, to the humbly cut through the BS. One, we were evaluating whether you and your head of marketing were tight and connected and aligned. But two, we were evaluating whether you, the CEO, cared about marketing, right? And I think it's an incredible asset. When you think about the game now, I compare it to baseball a lot, and it's became, because so much business now across all industries is controlled by private equity. The There's a lot of analytic mindset going on, right? It's like baseball. It's like it's been taken over by analytics. And so what we're searching for are CEOs. It's okay to be a quant, but are you a quant that understands the value of brand, right? And I always use the example of when Steve Jobs came back to Apple, he personally drove Think Different, right? To get the company back on track. He didn't delegate the vision and strategy and core idea of the company to a team so that he could focus on metrics, right? He said, if I'm going to get this company right in the second time around, and he had all that wisdom from getting burned the first time, he was personally getting involved. So we look for CEOs who want to personally be involved and understand that power, right? And I think that's part of why we're such big believers in you. Is most CEOs sort of push that off and don't know the importance of that to their franchisees, to their customers, to their investors, and the value creation of that. And you get that in spades. The second part is related to your point about narrative. So now we have the CEO, we have the CMO, we know the CEO's invested, we know the CMO and the CEO are aligned. We went looking for new models for marketing to be more effective, right? And so we spent a lot of time, and you can search it yourself. I did thousands of searches on, and I've done them since with AI tools on who are the new marketing thought leaders, who are the smartest people in marketing in the world. And what's fascinating is it's a really short list. Like there's not many new marketing thought leaders out there. And what you also see in the research is it's actually a lot of CEOs that come up on the list. Richard Branson, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. Like it's actually, and the academics are all old or have passed away. So what we started to do, all the people that wrote all the marketing tech books. So what we started to do was we looked outside of marketing for marketing thought leadership, and um, we were doing some work for a financial services company, came across an economist by the name of Robert Shiller out of Yale, who's won the Nobel Prize in economics. And he had written a paper and then a book called Narrative Economics. And it was all about, in economics, Keynes had sort of talked about animal spirits. And it was this unquantifiable variable that economists couldn't quantify. They could quantify GDP and all the different economic data, but they couldn't sort of quantify the mob and how the mob thought. And so what Schiller did is he used Google Ngrams, and they had documented every newspaper and every book back throughout the history of the world. And he actually started to use the tool to go quantify narratives and show how narratives had driven economic impact, right? And so now tying it back to that point about CEOs want growth, all we do is try and tie narratives to the growth, right? Just really simply show the correlation and the relationship between the narratives of a company and growth. And to your third question about AI, AI is the magic tool that allows us to see what the narratives are in a category and industry with target audiences, right? And so uh, Schiller had used engrams. We use sort of the tools have gotten a little more sophisticated since he wrote that in 26. He did the work in 2016, 17, and the paper in 2018. Um, but now we use a tool called Quid. We use a tool called Talkwalker, and there's another one called Blackbird AI. And so we spend a lot of money on tools so that we can analyze narratives on brands, on categories, on topics, and then take those sort of take the learnings from that to present back to a CEO what is the narrative of their company in the marketplace, right? And a lot of times marketers would show up with research in the past and say, we did a study with 1,500 people, and the CEO would discredit the study right out of the gate. But now we walk in and we say, this is every piece of news and every piece of social about your brand in the last 2 years. If you want to discredit that, you might as well just go put your head in the sand outside because you're full of it, right? Back to the BS thing. And then we use the narrative structure and the AI structure to just help, as I said, connect narratives to growth and help companies sort of change that narrative trajectory in order to drive that growth they want. That's a
Yes.
long answer, so I apologize.
Well, I shouldn't ask three questions in a bunch like that. So,
Yeah,
that
that
was,
was,
I mean,
you always do
you're
that.
even taking notes.
Yeah,
No, but it's interesting that the tool that you just described for us, I mean, we've been using it in our brand, obviously, and you've been driving that, but just it was interesting the last time we viewed it, John, we saw changes from when we first got together almost 2 years ago in this. And it was instantly validating to the decisions we had made last year that said, hey, our brand is perceived like this. It matches what we think we are, which was a good validating point. But it was fascinating to see because it really was exactly our customers and what people were saying. And you had pulled in everything, like every single data point out there in our company. And, I think you described it as the love language
yeah,
of our company, but it really has had a direct impact on everything, even how we do photo shoots and how we interview people for testimonial videos, because we want to capture what you brought to us. Like, hey, it does exist. And does the imagery and the branding and the impressions that we want to put into the market match that? And, we didn't have that before. I mean, I'm getting up there and, 20 years ago, we didn't have a tool like that that could instantaneously go, this is what people are saying about your brand. And to
yeah.
that level of detail, the vision of, for the folks listening or watching there, the word cloud that you had pulled up and all of the weight on that was just fascinating to see.
Yeah, no, but I think it's, to your credit again, like when we were together in the last cycle, we were doing quantitative research because AI wasn't as prevalent, right? But you were still determined to look at the data and see what the data was saying from the customer and from the marketplace. And we worked with you on that. But then in the next cycle, the new piece was now we could add AI and look at it through that filter. But I also remember when you and Brooke sort of pushed us to take 8,000 customer reviews and push that through the AI data too, and look at what that told us about, you know, um, and it was always related to some of your early instincts anyway, but just some of the things that, and just the power of the one-on-one mobility brand and the relationships. And again, there are the products, obviously, and everybody's buying a product to solve a problem. But you all understood, and your franchisees understood, and the people that work for them understood that they were building relationships and that accountability to that relationship and that partnership of the problem they were truly solving. And I think the really fun part of crunching that data for you all was seeing that come out, right? And then when we went back and did even sort of deeper dives with some of the individuals, seeing the stories come out about what that product had enabled in their lives, right? And that ability to go up the stairs again, or even just to bring the vacuum upstairs to clean. I remember that one, and it
Yeah.
was like, or get the Christmas lights again for the first time in 5 years, right? Just those little things that added up to that independence and that freedom that they hadn't experienced for so long, or in that emergency situation, were worried they weren't going to be able to experience. So it was powerful to be able to see it in the data.
Yeah, it was interesting. It's a good call out because that that research we did prior to doing, what I would call the old fashioned quant work where we actually interviewed people. But I remember it was somebody on your team that said, I think the question we should ask is, how has your life changed as a consequence of meeting one-on-one? And it completely changed the entire dynamic of what we learned, because what we found was, and this, the emotion. These folks, it was an emotional response to, I I didn't think I could ever do that, and now I've discovered I can, and
Yeah.
that's unlocked a world for me that I just thought I could never do again. And I'm not saying it is as well as they said it, but it was compelling and emotional and touching. But I don't think we would have been able to formulate that survey without having the prior information from that AI tool that really positioned us well to go, hey, listen, I think we've narrowed it down. Let's go now. Let's go get it. Let's really validate it. And boy, did you guys validate it with those wonderful people. And by the way, what was the coolest thing about it? Remember, for our audience, we interviewed all these folks, and they were like, "Hey, am I going to be on social media now?"
Well, they're
Right?
all
They all wanted to be famous.
yeah, they were, talking about how they were using the stair lift or whatever, the ramp, and thinking about their social media brand at the same time, but it was a fascinating piece. But in your line about emotion is such an important one and not to be lost. And it's such a sort of a key message about brands because there's the rational piece and there's the transaction. But very few brands have that kind of emotion at the core. And your brand and your people and your franchisees writ large have that emotion. Like you see it at your conferences when they get up to tell stories. I mean, there's tears sometimes because of what they've done for the people they've helped. And you, as a brand, if you can bring that kind of honesty to it, right? There's not a lot of people getting emotional about when Amazon delivers a package. Like there's not a lot of emotion in that world anymore. But there's just such pure, real, honest emotion in your business. And I think it's not soft. That is about growth, right? Back to we're not confused that it's growth. It's about growth, but emotion and growth don't go apart. They're actually part of the same. They're part of the solution.
No, I agree. And it's interesting. It's that so the next level for us is, and we're working at it now with you and, with our digital partners, everything else is just how do we, how do we educate the world that they can have the same experience or their parents can have the same experience? And, that's when you really start getting into, okay, how do we place the impressions in the market today? And if there's ever a change in how companies advertise, or it's shockingly changed today. And it's, in my view, and you'll say this much more articulately than I, it's just, it seems like we've gone from the perfect created 30-45 second Super Bowl commercial that cost $12 million a second to, I'm just going to put a 14-second reel on TikTok and get as many impressions and views and even comments. It's the world's changed, right? And
Yeah.
it's fun to be a part of it, but it, the it is broadened as to how you got to get your brand out there and how to leave that impression so someone goes, I get that. I get who they are.
Yep. And I think, and you've been through enough cycles. I've been through enough cycles now. We've established that I started in 89, right? So there's a few economic cycles in there, but as well as economic cycles, there's a number of industry cycles, right? And every industry has its growth and its contraction and its growth and its contraction, right? And I think in your industry, everyone finds the growth industries. And so there's a lot of competitors coming into your world because it's a growth business, right? Aging in America is a growth business. But what we see time and time again is two or three companies will lead on the backside of everybody jumping in opportunistically. And the majority of those won't survive. You saw it think about Starbucks and coffee shops, right? Like there were a million independent coffee shops because everyone said I can make a lot of money in coffee and selling, water for $5. But um, the but the people that execute well, that have the discipline, that have the leadership, that have the right, they're the ones that sort of get through to the other side and grab that growth as this thing, because there'll be three competitors, right, that sort of lead this thing nationally, and that's the fight, right? It's sometimes it gets hard to not get distracted in the middle of the race, right? Like, or the middle of the game. Cause sometimes, when you get a little tired in the middle of the game, it's easy to start looking around, swivel your head around a little bit and start wondering what if. But that's the time, as you know, as an old athlete, when the winners kind of separate themselves.
No, I think you're right. And I think it's easy to look at revenue as something to get that will take you outside what your core lane is for either a solution or product or for ultimate what you're trying to do for a family or a life. And I think, in this business, staying focused on how can we make that life better
Yeah.
is in many ways sort of limiting. I mean, we want to be on the forefront of having access to all the right equipment and products and everything else, but we don't want to expand into product lines that take us away from the core thing we do. And it's tempting.
Yep.
And we wouldn't be the first brand that did that. As you're, the narrative and the AI, John, and I'll speak selfishly to my core demographic, which are people over 65, which is the
Yep.
bulk of our customers. How are they responding as consumers to this change and how the messaging is coming out and everything else? I mean, is that as that demographic grows and it's 7,000 people are turning 65 a day, and how's that influencing people how they market and CEOs and CMOs today?
Yeah, I think the piece, well, again, it's all right about the macros. So I'll give you one funny story. My mother now has started creating Instagram reel videos of her dog, and and she's 82. And so the piece is, we know the two big pieces are the aging and the loneliness variable, right? And social media is a natural sort of connector for those two pieces. And to your point earlier, and to our conversation earlier, uh, all those people that had just had that ramp put in or that chairlift put in, all talking about, is this going to be on social, right? So now you just think about the time variable that they have, the free time, the loneliness variable, and the aging variable. And those three macros are just meeting. And so social is more and more powerful a tool for all. It'll be interesting now how AI, these AI tools are so powerful, like how that starts to dissect that even more.
Yeah, my mom's 83 and doesn't do social media, but what she does do is she literally physically hangs out with her friends.
Yeah.
And then they showed my mom the reels. My mom says, "Send that to me." And then she sent it to me. And I'm like, "Ma, I can get you on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's free. I can do that." No, I don't want to deal with it. So I'm gonna get her on Facebook because I think she would love it. But
Oh, they're all going there.
so John, what's next for Boathouse? You guys have been in business for 25 years, and what's the future for you guys?
Yeah, I think the piece. So, we just keep kind of moving up that ladder, right? So it's, increasingly we focus on targeting CEOs who feel like their vision is not being communicated through the company. And then we go back and sort of educate them on why it's not being communicated. Like they delegated the vision, they gave some to HR, they gave some to marketing, they gave some to investor relations, they gave some, and then they're like, gee, because I wonder why it got, and then each of those people went away and reinterpreted the strategy a little bit, and then they pushed it down to and so that simple discipline that the military historically in the U.S. has done so well, which is how an order gets from a general to the private kind of thing, has been lost in corporate America, right? Because we think of ourselves, CEOs think of themselves as quants and they think of themselves as delegators and delegation is good. But then you get that problem that Steve Jobs corrected, which is all those people try and add value and they dilute. And so we're seeing these CEOs increasingly. So we're having fun, and speaking of humbly cut through the BS, of just going right at CEOs now and saying, if you're having this problem, we want to help you, and not getting stuck in the marketing silos, right? Because that's where now we have a bureaucrat who's making too many decisions about what's in their best interest, not the company's best interest. So we're trying to increasingly, boldly take out the middleman a little bit, and and we know now that from a data standpoint, and that we can move narratives in a really predictable way. So we have a confidence because we know how to move narratives, that we know we can keep that promise. Back to where I started about make a promise, keep a promise. I
Yep.
know we can move narratives now for CEOs. So back to day one, 1989, if I can get the narrative from the CEO, I can execute it.
Well, I'm glad you and I are doing our second tour of duty together on the brand. So it's been great to work with you and your team again. And I always feel smarter after working with you guys on this. But
Feelings mutual. Yeah.
so in closing, the survey, the next survey, when do you think it'll be out and where can they find it?
So it'll be out, uh, sometime in February. The data team's always like, okay, John, stop messing with the data. And it's been, what's nice is it's been getting a lot of coverage now in the last few years. Like it was, classic. Nobody cared the first year. Few people cared the second year. Last year, we probably had 30 media outlets cover it. And so it builds momentum as we have more data, and more sort of trend data. Um, so I look for it at the end of February.
Well, I mean, my podcast is huge, John. So we'll get
Yeah.
huge impression lay for you and get it out.
Yeah.
Well, John, this has been great. I always love talking to you, and I think we humbly cut through the bullshit the last 30 minutes. So, um,
You always do, Joe. You always do.
listen, appreciate it. Travel safe, and all the best to the Boathouse team. And I will be talking to you soon.
Thank you for having me on your podcast.
That wraps up our time with John Connors on 101 Mobility Conversations. We'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.